Hello and welcome to our Cornerstone Counselling thing that we're doing, video thing for Facebook. I'm Nathan. I don't know where Chris is compared to me. Chris, yeah. And we have somebody new with us today. We have a guest. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself and say hi to everybody?
Yeah, I'm Andrew Mercer. I am an independent autism and SEN consultant and work for a business partnership called RSSF Training. That's the simplest way of introducing myself, I suppose, at the moment. I can talk more about that.
Excellent, like it. Yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you for joining us, mate. So as a bit of self-disclosure, Andrew and I went to school many moons ago. So we know each other, and Nathan has met Andrew for the grand total of about 6.5 minutes so far. So we're all getting along like a house on fire. Yeah, but we thought we'd invite Andrew along to talk a little bit about some of the work that he does, answer maybe a few of our questions, and if we get some interest from doing this sort of thing, then maybe we'll make it a regular feature, asking the experts, because Nathan and I aren't experts, but other people are, so we can ask them to come in and talk about their specific field of influence. Andrew, I thought it'd be great, if it's okay with you, just to kind of kick off with the question that throws around in sense of therapy sessions that we might have with clients. Are you able to define what autism is?
Okay, so autism is in the medical books. It's a pervasive developmental disorder, which is not a particularly nice word. The word disorder is not liked by the autism community. They prefer the word condition or neurodivergence, neurodiverse, and all that sort of thing. But autism is defined medically by 3 areas of difference: social communication differences, social interaction differences, and flexibility of thought differences. There's also sensory processing needs, which in the past was not considered part of the spectrum, but now is very much so. So everyone who is autistic will have some level of sensory processing needs of some kind. I can talk a bit about that. So very simply, social interaction or social communication, you've got to think about some autistic people don't speak, some autistic people speak a bit, some autistic people speak loads, and you wouldn't know at all the difference between sort of someone who is not autistic and autistic when they have a conversation. You see very subtle differences sometimes. Then you have the reverse of that, which is the understanding of language or understanding of communication. So some autistic people already struggle with understanding the information that's coming at them, especially verbal information. It's often too fast or it's heard in bits. Some autistic people will describe it as an untuned television, so they hear bits of the information and not all of it. Some people with autism will take it very literally. So literal language such as pull your socks up, cat's got your tongue, butterflies in your tummy. I watch adverts on the telly and always think how that could be taken literally. Was one a while ago about this giant monster who jumped on your chest when you had a cold, and Beecham's would save you. Or sorry, other brands are available. But you know, I used to think that was terrifying. Gaviscon, the one with firemen who go down your throat. I was just like, wow, if you're autistic and you're very young and don't understand it, your mum's saying, I'll give you Gaviscon, and you're thinking, no, don't throw firemen down my throat. Anyway, so literal understanding. And then social interaction is a massive one. Really, it connects quite a lot to the communication. So having to understand about how you communicate when it's your turn to speak, just wanting to communicate. Some autistic people I talk to just don't want to because it's too hard. You had to think about how to join a group if you've got sort of 25 people in a group and you want to join it. I mean, obviously we're not allowed those big groups at the moment, but you know, where do you stand? When do you join? Do you even want to join? What are they talking about? What are they saying? And often autistic people will say that they're very much thinking about what they want to speak and what they can talk about. And they will often go into those situations and just start that, because actually it's easier just to start talking about their thing than try and join in with everyone else. There's a lady on Netflix, Hannah Gatsby, and she talks about not being cued in to a room full of people that have had a drink, or being the person in the room that has had a drink and everyone else hasn't. and so what you're experiencing is very different from everyone else. I think that's a quite good description of how it can feel socially for an autistic person. Then the flexibility side of things, lots of autistic people love routine, don't like surprises, prefer things to be a set way, prefer to know what's happening, what's not happening. So change is a big issue for them. So, but flexibility also can be about how they experience interest as well. So they have high focused interest on certain things, which is not unusual. Lots of people have those, but often, especially with younger ones, is they're very focused on one thing. So that might be Lego. Some of the classics seem to be trains, dinosaurs, space, and the Titanic, which has popped up in about 6 of my most recent conversations with clients. The obsession with the Titanic, and specific annoyance at the film version with Kate Winslet in it. That wouldn't have happened in the Titanic. So that I seem to have had that conversation lots recently. So I don't know why. But there's, some of the very repetitive behaviours.
Is it that you don't like the Titanic, Andrew, do you think?
Maybe
if you mentioned it with 6 people. Yeah.
I'm starting the conversations and don't realise what I'm doing. I'm going, what do you think about the Titanic? Just out of interest. So there's lots of things about, in younger years, you might see repetitive behaviours, repetitive play, and that's one of the areas they use to diagnose sometimes. So lining things up, spinning wheels, watching parts of DVDs over and over and over again, that sort of thing. So, and then the problem is it's very hard to describe autism in a short space of time. And then the sensory side of things. So we've got the 5 main senses, which are you will learn when you're in science, and I always forget them every time I train people on this. Your sight, your taste, your smell, your hearing, your touch, and then there's 3 others which often talked about with autism, which are vestibular sense, which is about your balance in your ear, whether you're upright, not upright. You've got your proprioception, which is your pressure sense, if you like, which is your muscles or your joints, knowing how much you've got to push something or pull something to get it to move, knowing where you are in relation to everyone else. So lots of dyspraxic people are often quite clumsy. I think I am one of those very clumsy people, knocking things over all the time, don't realise where my elbows are in relation to other people's heads and things like that, which is difficult when I was teaching 5-year-olds. I don't know how many I knocked on the head as I walked past. And then the interoception, which has been talked about more recently, sort of the last few years, is all about understanding your internal systems. So autistic people sometimes don't realise they're hungry, hot, cold, ill, need the toilet, or don't need the toilet, or do need the toilet, all those sort of things. And then with autism, you can be sort of under and oversensitive to your senses, depending on the time of day, depending on what mood you're in. So it kind of goes a bit up and down. The other area of autism that's been recently talked about is something called pathological demand avoidance, PDA, which is another profile of autism which presents slightly differently to autism, sort of the typical you would read in a book, in that they are resisting ordinary everyday demands, and it's driven by a lot of high anxiety and need to be in control. So they present differently to your typical autistic person. When I say typical autistic person, every autistic person is different, but I mean typical in respect of what it says in the book of what autism is. And so some of the things we would use with an autistic person are different than we would use with someone on a PDA profile, because they just don't work. And I think it's important to remember everyone with autism is different. So I've got experience of meeting thousands of autistic people, listening to their parents, talking to their professionals that work with them, and so often they're all very different, and what works with one doesn't work with another. And so some of the things that if you've got people listening to this now, watching this, some of the people that might be watching this that are autistic or have got autistic children might be thinking, well, he didn't say this and my child does that. And so I might not have said everything about what your child does, but that doesn't mean they're not autistic, and it also doesn't mean they are. So yeah, it's a big subject. When we do training sessions, we try and fit as much as we can in an hour or two. You could train for, I did a 4 years of masters all about autism, and I still haven't learned everything, and I'm always learning something else, and something else pops in and surprises me, so it's all good fun. But yeah, so in short, to recap, it's 3 areas of sort of, it was called impairment. It's not a very nice word, but that's what it was called in the books, in the ICD-10 or the DSM-5, depending on which one you're looking at. So you've got social interaction, social communication, flexibility of thought, and then sensory processing needs. And they're looking at all those areas to diagnose you now with an autism spectrum disorder, and then off you go and find out what that means for you, is kind of how it works. Whereas in the past, there were tons of different labels, which were very confusing. So pretty much said ASD, and then you get like a little bit that says maybe PDA profile. Asperger's isn't written anymore, but I have seen it. It's not supposed to be, but it is on some people's diagnostic paperwork still. And the only difference between the two was about your language development. So someone with Asperger's might have had a normal-ish language development, whereas someone with autism would have had a disordered development of some kind in their language, missed their basic milestones. So that was basically the difference. But
yeah, okay.
Like I say, it's not talked about anymore.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff, mate. It's yeah, we talked about inviting experts on, and that's you've given us a lot of information there. Thank you for that. Are you able to tell us a little bit then about sort of what your role is? So you're working in this environment. What does that mean? What do you do?
So I am a independent consultant. So what I do now is I go either into schools or work with them online and advise. They would come to me with a child who is presenting difficulties in school. They're struggling to manage in the environment, struggling to manage the work, and I would help them to unpick that and come up with ideas and strategies. Although, like I said, some of the autistic community prefer the phrase helpful approaches. So we come up with helpful approaches. I think they feel that strategies are about things being done to you, which is not quite as nice as done with you. So helpful approaches are a better phrase, apparently. So yeah, offer helpful advice, give ideas for what might help that person cope better in the environment, how to change the environment. Not big things. I mean, I did once suggest to a head teacher that he needed to give up his office for this one particular student because it was the only place he was happy. And I said, well, let's just take you out of your office, which I was quite bold to say to a head teacher. But he did actually, for a period of time, he did say, that's okay, well, I'll try and find somewhere else to work. I felt a bit bad, but actually it did work for that young person. So, but normally it's subtle changes in the environment as opposed to a whole new room or stuff like that. So would advise them on, making sure there are more visuals around for the children to understand what they're seeing and what they're doing, where they're supposed to be and when, advise on other behavioural strategies that might work for them to sort of better cope. Normally, a lot of the advice in schools is around sensory, so it's about making the environment better for them from a sensory point of view. So that's one part of what I do. I also do individual work with young people. That's something I do. Some of them may have just been given a diagnosis or be struggling with their emotional understanding or just need some sort of personal development sessions. So we go through that with them, try and help them understand what autism means to them, how they can self-manage, come up with their own sensory processing plan or whatever it is they want to put in place. People call it sensory diet, but just basically what they need to do to keep their body a bit happier. So I do individual work. I do individual consultations with parents. So if a parent needs me to sort of help them with the problems they're having at home, that's been a lot of my work over the last year or so, which you could probably imagine. Has been all about that, really. Parents ringing up and saying, how do I get my child to do any schoolwork at home? That's been quite a big one. So we've come up with lots of sort of ways of trying to do that. Fun project-based work or trying to replicate a classroom at home as much as you can. It's not been easy, is it? So sort of gone through some of that with them. So individual consultancy with parents. Then I do training-based work with schools and other other agencies, anyone really. Most of our work is school based, but you know, we have had some sort of care workers come in and have training with us and things like that. So that's been a new thing. So that varies from training them on what autism is generally, what are the useful approaches. We might do just sensory training. We might do training about PDA, which I mentioned a minute ago. Lots of girls with autism getting diagnosed more now. That's starting to sort of rev up a bit. People are realizing the differences between what a typical autistic person might look like and what a girl with autism looks like. Some of them mask their needs and don't show they're autistic at all. And I work with a few, and they, you know, you can some days completely forget you're talking to someone who's really struggling socially and really doesn't quite understand fully what they're talking about. But on the surface, you're like, wow, this person's amazing. There's nothing wrong with them at all. What are you all talking about? But, you know, underlying, there's lots of issues. So we do training on girls with autism, shorter things like training on toileting issues, sleeping issues, eating issues, transition, so training people on how to help a person with autism go from school to school or class to class, or even just shorter transitions or new homes, holidays, all those sort of things. So giving them ideas on that. So individually I do that, so does Lauren, my business partner, and then as RSSF Training in the middle, most of our work is all about parent workshops. So we offer lots of different workshops, all on the same subjects I've just mentioned, and then any extras that people say they might need. We're doing one this year on autism meets adolescence. So that idea of going into puberty, going into being a teenager and having autism, what does that look like? What does that mean? So that's a new one we're trying this year. We do a family support package, which is quite good. So we get, it's quite good. That's a good sales pitch, isn't it? That's quite good. But it's all about sort of bringing together our workshops and saying to the school, saying to the parent that pay us a lump, and you can come to a load of our workshops and we'll do direct consultancy with you. And then some of that work can be with siblings. So for, you know, you've got the autistic child at home and then you've got the neurotypical sibling who is like, what's going on? Why are they seemingly getting away with everything? Why are they getting treated differently? And then we're able to sit with that sibling and say, well, actually, this is why, you know, they're autistic. This is what it means, you know, this is what it's going to mean for you, you know, as well as giving the parents ideas and actually saying to the sibling, you know, what about you and how does it feel for you? So we don't do a lot of that at the moment, but it's something that every now and then a parent will say, can you talk to my 17-year-old daughter who hates her 11-year-old autistic brother or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
and that's fascinating, isn't it? Because I suppose in a sense that kind of area is where I guess Nathan and I work in that sort of area, that we will have referrals of, you know, my like you say, my 18-year-old is struggling because the 11-year-old is autistic, and they seem to be getting some element of preferential treatment in the eyes of the 18-year-old and how that might work. And, you know, from our relational perspective, that's where we are and that's where we sit. It's fascinating to hear the stuff that you're talking about there. And I love your little sales line of RSS training. Quite good. I thought that was
it's
quite good. Yeah, very good.
I've never been very good. Still not very good at blowing my own trumpet when it comes to what we do. So we do rely on reviews from parents to do that selling. Lauren's much better at saying how brilliant we are. I mean, we are good. We can do what we do, and we do what we're saying. And the thing is about us is if we can't, we will try and help you find someone who can. So even if we don't think we're right for a support, you know, we will try and find someone else who can. And all of our training can be bespoke as well. All of our sessions are bespoke. So I don't sort of necessarily run with set packages of work that I do with people. I just will talk to you, understand what it is that you need, and then build it around that. Whereas, you know, so I know that there are packs out there you can buy that say this is how you deliver it, this will solve your problems. I try and pull from everything I find, put something together that then actually meets the needs of the young person or the parent or the school, rather than thinking, well, that's what I did with one parent, so that'll definitely work. I have to think, it might work, but then also it might not, you know. So I once had a child who was biting everyone, and previously I'd written a sign that said, don't bite people, only bite food. And that was brilliant. We stuck it on the wall, and for that one child it worked perfectly. And then for another child I thought, well, let's go for that again. And that child ate the sign, and carried on biting people and food and signs. So we had to think of something else. We had to come up with other ways of dealing with it. That didn't work. So, very much always reacting to trying to find out what's going on. But yeah, no, that sibling work, that family work, I can imagine you guys, you must get some of that coming across, because it's so hard for, the parents and the sibling of that, autistic young person, especially when it's, going through the difficult and the bad times, or just after diagnosis, or like you said, when the child gets older. I've had one recently where I think you've got a 15-year-old neurotypical daughter, and then the brother is 12, and the brother doesn't see the difference in hierarchy, so he doesn't realize that she's 3 years older than him and therefore may have some extra privileges. Because of his autism, he's just like, everyone is the same. So if she's up until 1 o'clock in the morning, so should I be allowed to be up until 1 o'clock in the morning. And he can't he's not getting that at all. And of course, that's annoying the 15-year-old, because she wants to stay up later. And he's like, wow, well, I wasn't allowed to stay up until this time when I was 12. And so it's really, I suppose that happens in a lot of families anyway, but when you've got the autism, it sort of compounds it, really makes it harder again.
And I guess you've got the communication struggle around that as well, because if you're working with a family where everyone in the family is neurotypical, you can have a rational based conversation that would fit everybody. You don't need to tailor individual bits, whereas, like you say, you're sat in that environment and it just feels unfair for everyone.
Yeah, and that's what happens. And there's, we talk a lot about, for when it's with autism, and a lot of their behaviors are all about communication. So they're doing something because they can't verbally, or they haven't got another way of communicating to you what they're not happy with. So they will do it sometimes in a withdrawn way. They just go very quiet, or they'll do it in a very physical way and be outward with their behaviors, throw things, shout, scream, bite, punch, whatever it is. And for the sibling, looking at that not being punished, because we're saying, actually, yeah, it is wrong to hit and punch and shout and scream, but actually that autistic child knows that already. We told them that, they know it, they can tell you that. But in those moments, it's not about whether they can understand in that moment of stress what's right and wrong. It's about, I've got to tell you something, I don't know how to do it, I'm so frustrated, panic, scream, I'm going to punch you because then you'll listen to me, or I'm going to punch you because that's what got me something last time. I had a child who used to throw tables because at some point in his life, throwing a table got him taken out to a nice, calm, quiet space. So he just thought, well, how do I communicate that? I don't know how to say, excuse me, sir, please can I go to a calm, quiet space? He just went, what, throw table? And then he got taken to a calm, quiet space. So from an ease of communication point of view, that was easier for him. We did teach him eventually that it was much nicer for everyone else and him if he could just show a card to say, I need to leave the room. And he did start to use that eventually, which was good. But yeah, for that sort of sibling situation at home, they're thinking, well, hang on, he's just thumped me and now he's not getting told off, he's not got his iPad taken away, and having that conversation with them to say, actually, it's not effective. So often I've seen, if you just say to an autistic child, fine, you've done that, I'm taking that thing away, it doesn't have the effect you want it to have. It
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to tell you something. I was just trying to tell you something, and now you're taking my iPad away. I'm getting in trouble for just trying to communicate. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a.
And that's really interesting, actually, because the way you said it, it was making me think that, we a word I don't like is like dysregulated behavior, because it always feels like a judgment. But with an autistic person, that's not necessarily, it can be obviously, but it's not necessarily dysregulated behavior. It's just an attempt at communication sometimes. And if we're judging it as a dysregulation, then we're just being unfair. But I think it's interesting that the point, I kind of wanted to bring Nathan on this, because when we work with siblings, quite often the bit we get is around them having an opportunity to be heard. Because I always feel that's where siblings can get stuck, is that they feel they're in this like abyss almost sometimes, and to have an avenue where they feel heard. Nathan, is that your experience as well with clients?
Yeah, I think like you say, it's that kind of, being a child's difficult enough, kind of learning and developing and kind of all that sort of stuff, and all the complications that we have as humans growing up, and then kind of throwing added complications into that, and family dynamics and all that sort of stuff. And I think Andrew said it perfectly there. Was like the kids I've worked with, they've kind of been, well, yeah, exactly. Why it's not fair? Like, I don't get it. Like, if I do that behavior, I'm going to get like this, or whatever this may be, but punishments. But not hitting children is bad. But you know, there are strict boundaries and rules, and then kind of potentially with some autistic children, they're very different. The rules have to be different for them to be able to kind of function. And then you know, I've worked with families in the past where they've had multiple conditions, I suppose, in the house, and all the rules have to vastly different rules for all the children. Like some children needed like strict boundaries, and other kids needed like to be able to kind of like do whatever they needed to do. And it's managing that. So it's kind of like, yeah, this children, but also the parents as well. And kind of that leads me down. I was as you're talking, I was thinking about, you know, what is there any kind of like stock advice for parents who might have just had a diagnosis for their children, or you know, or for people out there? I don't know if there is any, or whether it's just like, give us a ring.
Yeah, well, part of it is that I think one of the parents I worked with recently, his mindset was knowledge is power. He said the more that you can read and learn about autism from other parents, especially, but also from the professionals that are working with your child. So the National Autistic Society talks about their spell approach, and the L of spell at the end is links. So that idea of getting to know your child through the other people that also work with them. So, you know, not just you and what you know, because as the parent, you know them the best, you're there with them 24/7, but also understanding how they are presenting in different environments. So I always try and encourage parents to, you know, find out from the other people around your child what happens in those situations, to try and start unpicking why it's happening, what, if you can, are the triggers, so that you can then start looking at what you might need to put in place, or what you might need to avoid initially. You know, there might be things that you really desperately as a parent are thinking, I don't want to not take them shopping. Let's just use that one as a classic example. And actually I've said to parents, but do you have to take them shopping? Because if you know that taking them shopping is going to cause a big problem, there's going to be a massive rage outburst, whatever you call them, then could you just avoid that at the moment? You know, one day you want them to be able to go and manage going into a shop, and you want them to be able to cope with it for as long as they might need to, as they're an adult, to go into the shop and get the things they need. But right now, as a child, do they need to be able to do that? Can you avoid it? So I think my advice is generally get as much information as you can from everywhere. Read books from, you know, autistic people. There's good ones out there like The Reason I Jump. I can't remember what the name of the author is, but it's a great one. There's Luke Jackson does one. It's quite an old one, and it's called Freaks, Geeks, and Asperger's Syndrome, which is quite good. But he does little bits in there where he goes, as a parent of an autistic child, because he was 14 when he wrote it, and he says, this is the advice I would give you as a parent of an autistic child, to do this, this, and this. I can't remember. One of them is about allowing branded clothing, I think was something really silly. He said, just give your autistic child one piece of branded clothing so they're less likely to get bullied for having weird clothes or whatever it was. It was just, but he does little things like that. So yeah, reading that information. I think getting online and meeting parents is good. I think you want to meet parents of other other autistic people, certainly from the workshops we've done, from the coffee mornings that we run. We've only run one, but we're planning on running another one. One of the things that all the parents have said, it's great to talk to other parents who are going through it, and talking to parents of older autistic people who perhaps may still be struggling with their life a bit, but they have gone on and they have progressed. So I know lots of parents, when they've had the diagnosis early on, some medical professionals have said to them, oh, your child will never do this, your child will never do that. And you're thinking that's terrible. And so the parent goes away thinking, well, my child's never going to have a job, never going to have a life, never going to have a house. They're always going to be living at home, or whatever it is that they suddenly think, and they go through that grieving process of, you know, they thought they had a neurotypical child, they've got an autistic child. What now? What's going to happen? And some parents are just, well, whatever, they are who they are, move on. And other parents get, are allowed to get, and they do get very upset about it. So I do say, talk to parents of older autistic children who perhaps have moved on in their life, have achieved GCSEs or A levels or whatever it is you think is an achievement in your own right, whether it's they have got a job now. I'm working with a lad who his mum will talk openly about, he was going to go to jail. There's no way he'd have got anywhere. And now he works as an apprentice caretaker and life is moving on for him. And he's not going to go to jail because he's all right. He's got his life sorted. He knows what he's doing. He's moved away from the sort of bad eggs he was with before, and it's all good. So it's nice to hear that. And I think for, like I say, parents who have newly diagnosed, meeting other parents is a really good thing to do. And like I say, gaining all that information from around sort of the world. Be a bit careful, I would say, about some social media, but then we say that about all social media, don't we? Because there can be lots of negativity. I know from myself personally as a professional, I've kind of been told, well, how can you advise someone who is autistic when you're not autistic yourself? Or why is your information any better than someone else's? And I'm like, well, it's my wife says, well, you might go to a heart surgeon and have heart surgery, but you wouldn't say to them, have you had heart surgery done to you? Because actually you would hope they just had that knowledge. The fact that they're a good heart surgeon doesn't need them to have had heart surgery on themselves to have that. I absolutely advocate getting the information from an autistic person, and a lot of the work I do is with autistic people, and I'm forever sitting down with those that are sort of a bit more aware of themselves. I sit down with them and I say, so I think this about autism, what do you think about it? And I'll get into full-on arguments and debates with them about it, because that's the way we learn. We need to speak to them and getting that information. So, but on social media you get that, some people will say, unless you work with autistic people, have that knowledge, and or are autistic yourself, you're not really going to know what you're talking about. But I get loads of information from other parents, from other professionals, of what they see about this child they're working with or what they know. And yeah, sorry, that was a long answer for what your question was. But so so what's the main advice? Talk to other parents of autistic people, read and look at information from autistic people themselves, and talk to parents of older autistic children, so you kind of see where life could possibly go. And yeah, some of them have got stories that aren't great, but that's also realistic to talk to as well, and sort of see where they perhaps went wrong. A lot of parents I know one particular parent I talk to a lot has got a 27-year-old now, and she will say to me, the reason we're where we are now with him still living at home and things haven't moved on as much as I want is because I didn't have the support when he was younger. The amount of support now is different compared to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So hopefully there's more support now, although some people still say there isn't enough. But there's more support now, so hopefully some of those things that happened to her wouldn't happen to your young person, that sort of thing.
Andrew, that's brilliant. That's so cool. If people wanted to get in contact with you, how do they do that? So
you can go to the RSSF Training Facebook page, which is just at RSSF Training. That you can get through to us, like I say, to talk to me or Lauren through there. If you wanted to get in touch with me directly, I've got an email, which is amercersen@gmail.com. I've also got my own Facebook page, which is amercersen. I think it's just at amercersen. So that's if you wanted to just talk to me directly, get some more information from me, or have sessions with me or whatever. But like I said, those are the two ways to get in touch with either of us. It's probably the quickest way. I mean, the email for RSSF is rssftraining@gmail.com, and there is a website. Just thought about that from what you said earlier. We've got a website, which is just www.rssftraining.co.uk.
Excellent. Like it. Many routes into contact. That's good.
Yeah,
I like it.
No, lots of ways in.
Yeah. So, Andrew, thank you for your time today.
Yes, thank you.
I really like that Nathan and I had this vision of like doing 10, 15-minute little snippet videos. We had this like 3 years ago. We've never yet managed to get one under half an hour. Such was the great content today. I really thank you for bringing what you brought, because that's real gold information, I think, there for people who haven't maybe come across your type of service in the past. We're in slightly different areas of the country. Maybe there's different approaches educationally to how these things work. So for someone to see something different, I think is really positive. Obviously, with everything moving into like an online sphere now as well, I guess that nationalizes your operation somewhat, that you're available everywhere. So,
yeah, absolutely. We've had parents from Ireland, Scotland, Skegness. We were like, we've made it to Skegness. Boom.
Love it.
That was the big achievement for us. So absolutely. We you can, all our work is online. I think we will start doing physical stuff as well one day, but still keep the online support, because we've got lots of parents. I've got one lady that rings me almost every month now from Oxfordshire, who is having a really difficult time. Well, hopefully soon she's going to have a better time, because she's just shifting schools and things might change. But anyone can get in touch with us.
That's good. Good. Well, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate you giving up your valuable time to talk to us today. If anybody who's watching wants to get in contact with Andrew, he's given you his details. I'm sure you'll comment on the post when this goes out. You can write them all down there as well if you want to. If anybody wants to get in contact with Moby, Nathan, or myself, then feel free. Sorry, mate, every time. You know our details. cornerstonesw.co.uk. You can email us at contact@cornerstonesw.co.uk. But for now, thank you very much for your time, and goodbye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.